folks, I want to bring you up to speed with something that's happening today, which is that I've developed mild symptoms of the coronavirus, that's to say a temperature and a persistent cough, and on the advice of the Chief Medical Officer, I've taken
The coronavirus infections and deaths trend trajectories for the UK and US are continuing to go parabolic, far beyond anything anyone could have imagined even 2 weeks ago, when the US had just 170 deaths and the UK 100, since which time have continued to follow catastrophic trajectories, recently prompting dire warnings out of the UK and US, for instance to expect as many as 20,000 UK deaths and 200,000 in the US. So the focus of this analysis will be on the probability of dying if one contracts Covid-19 over the coming weeks. Analysis which is based on data from the Journal of American Medical Association and the Lancet's analysis of Italian and Chinese deaths. Firstly, male and female risk of Covid-19 death. Of the 1,700 Italian deaths analysed, 63% were male, which resolves to a CFR of 4.7%, whilst the case fatality rate for women was 2.8%. So men are at near twice a high risk of death than women, which is likely due to lifestyle differences. Age analysis. Covid-19 appears to punish the elderly, where the younger you are, the less likely you are to die. In fact, if you are under the age of 30, then your risk of death is negligible, whilst if you are 30 to 60, then generally your risk of death should be less than 1%, which is still about 10 times the flu, but not as bad as it could be. However, at above the age of 60, the case fatality rate starts to become horrific, rising from 3.5% then to 12.5%, and 20% for those 80 to 89. This data also confirms that the Chinese lied about their number of deaths, as their data case fatality rate is less than half Italy's. So why is age proving to be such a significant indicator of the likelihood of death? Well, the older people are, then the more likely they are to have comorbidities, where those with heart disease have a 13.2% risk of dying, diabetes 9.2%, hypertension 8.4%, cancer 7.6%, and on. Therefore, the primary determinant of whether one dies as a consequence of Covid-19 is less so age, but rather whether people have comorbidities or not, which are more prevalent in the elderly people, hence the higher death rates. That and people become more frail with age, i.e. immune systems are less able to survive the Covid-19 onslaught. So if you're young but have a comorbidity such as diabetes, then don't delude yourselves that you're safe, because you're not. So take preventative actions to isolate so as to survive the coming coronavirus storm that's already hit London. And lastly, obesity. Where Italian deaths were concerned, a BMI proved to be a significant indicator of the likelihood of death, where basically the higher one's BMI is, then the greater the likelihood of death, which probably is due to obese people tending to be more likely to have comorbidities. 72% of Italian deaths were people who were overweight or obese. 28% of deaths were from people who are of normal weight, whilst underweight people just accounted for 0.6% of Italian deaths, which should be taken as a cue to shed some pounds now so as to reduce one's risk of death from Covid-19. Therefore, people who are underweight, under the age of 60 and have no comorbidities are at very low risk of death, probably around 5 times that of the flu. And people who are aged 30 to 60 and just overweight or about 25 times to 40 times the risk of death than flu. Whilst those at the highest risk are the over 60s who are overweight and have one or more comorbidity, who are likely at 70 times to 200 times the risk of death than from seasonal flu. So whilst we cannot do much where comorbidities are concerned, however, we can all reduce our risks of death from COVID-19 by shedding a few excess pounds over the coming weeks and months.